Everyone at my eviction party thought they knew what was happening. My son and daughter-in-law had it all planned out, get the old man to sign the papers, throw a celebration, collect their inheritance. But what they didn't realize is that I'd been planning too, and my plan was about to turn their happiest day into their worst nightmare. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. This story will show you that underestimating an elder can be the biggest mistake of your life. My name is Frederick Rodriguez, and today is supposed to be the most humiliating day of my 67 years. I'm standing in my own living room, the house I built with my late wife Maria 40 years ago, watching strangers celebrate my eviction like it's New Year's Eve. Finally free, reads the banner hanging across my fireplace. The same fireplace where Maria and I hung Christmas stockings for our son Marcus every December. Balloons spell out goodbye in bright red letters, and there's even a cake, a cruel, beautiful cake, with frosting that looks like blood spelling out no more burden. I touch the rosary in my pocket, the one Maria gave me before she passed, 4 years ago. Dame fuerza mi amor, I whisper in Spanish, asking her for strength. The guests think I'm just a confused old Mexican who doesn't understand what's happening. They have no idea how wrong they are. My daughter-in-law, Jessica Martinez Rodriguez, is directing this circus like a Broadway producer. She's wearing a bright red dress, victory colors I suppose, and her voice cuts through the laughter as she shouts instructions to the party planners. Make sure the photographer gets Frederick cutting his own farewell cake. She calls out loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. This is a historic moment. Historic. That's one way to put it. Jessica approaches me with that smile she reserves for children and people she thinks are stupid. She places her hand on my shoulder and leans close, speaking slowly and loudly as if volume will somehow translate English into Spanish. Frederick, she shouts, though I'm standing right next to her, the nursing home has bilingual staff. You'll be so much more comfortable with people who speak your language. I nod politely, mixing my English with Spanish, the way she expects. Si, mija, thank you for thinking of me. You are muy thoughtful. But inside, I'm thinking how perfectly her condescending tone will sound on the recording equipment Dorothy helped me install last week. Marcus, my 34-year-old son, can barely look at me. He's standing by the window, fidgeting with his phone, avoiding eye contact like he did as a teenager when he'd broken something. The guilt is eating him alive, but not enough to stop him from going through with this. The guests start arriving around 3 o'clock. There's Mrs. Patterson from down the street who brought a sympathy card like I'm dying instead of just moving. Mr. and Mrs. Chen from the corner house show up with forced smiles and awkward small talk. So sorry about your transition, Frederick, Mrs. Patterson says, patting my arm like I'm a sick dog. I'm sure you'll love the nursing home. My aunt was so happy in hers. Gracias, Mrs. Patterson. You are very kind, I respond, playing the part they expect, while mentally noting how her sympathy will look when this story gets out. Then comes the moment Jessica has been planning for weeks. She claps her hands together and announces, everyone gather around. Frederick is going to cut his farewell cake. The photographer positions himself for the perfect shot of the broken old man cutting his own humiliation cake. The guests form a semicircle around me, phones out ready to capture my degradation for their social media feeds. Jessica hands me the knife with a flourish. Go ahead, Frederick, cut yourself a big piece of freedom. The laughter that follows feels like needles in my chest. These people, some of them neighbors I've known for decades, are actually enjoying this. They're watching a son evict his elderly father and treating it like entertainment. I cut the cake with steady hands. 40 years of construction work taught me precision, and I won't give them the satisfaction of seeing me shake. As I slice through the red frosting, I think about Maria and how she'd be horrified by what our son has become. A toast, shouts Ryan Mitchell, Marcus's best friend, and the mortgage broker who's been whispering poison in their ears for months. He raises his champagne glass high. To Frederick's new chapter, and to Marcus and Jessica's freedom, everyone raises their glasses. Everyone cheers. Everyone celebrates while I stand here holding a knife covered in red frosting that looks exactly like the blood of my broken heart. But then it's time for the main event. Jessica spreads a stack of official-looking documents across my dining table, the same table where Maria and I used to help Marcus with his homework. Just sign here, here, and here, Frederick, she says, pointing to lines marked with bright yellow sticky notes. She speaks slowly, using simple words. These papers will take you to your new home where you'll have friends and nurses to take care of you. I look at the documents, pretending to struggle with the English words. The guests lean in, watching the final act of my supposed defeat. Marcus finally approaches, placing his hand on my shoulder with false tenderness. "Dad, trust us," he says, his voice cracking slightly. "We know what's best for you. You'll be so much happier." I pick up the gold pen Jessica hands me, feeling its weight. Around me, the room falls silent except for the clicking of camera phones. This is their moment of triumph, the culmination of months of planning and manipulation. But as I sign my name with the careful precision of a man who's read construction contracts for 4 decades, I allow myself a small smile. Because what they don't know, what they can't possibly know, is that these aren't the only papers being signed today. And when they find out what I've really done, their celebration is going to become the worst nightmare of their lives. But to understand how I got to this moment, I need to take you back 6 months to a March afternoon that changed everything. It was a Tuesday, and I had left early from the grocery store because I forgot my shopping list. I was planning to surprise Marcus with his favorite tres leches cake for his birthday the following week. I came through the back door as always, carrying 2 bags of groceries, when I heard voices in the kitchen. Marcus and Jessica were talking, and something in their tone made me freeze behind the door. I can't stand living with the old Mexican anymore. Jessica's voice cut through the afternoon air like a knife. He's always asking where we're going, what we're doing, when we'll be back. It's suffocating. My heart stopped. In 40 years of living in this country, I had never heard such venom directed at me in my own home. But it was Marcus's response that truly broke me. "I know, babe, but we have to be patient until he signs the nursing home papers. We just have to keep pretending a little longer." The grocery bags trembled in my hands. My own son, the boy I raised after Maria died, the young man I put through college by working double shifts, was talking about me like I was a burden to be disposed of. Besides, Marcus continued, this house is worth at least $850,000. Once he's committed, we can sell it and finally start our real life. Jessica laughed, a cold, calculating sound that made my blood freeze. "Imagine everything we can do with that money. The trip to Europe, we've always wanted the downtown condo, the new car. Everything we've had to put off because of living with him. I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. These people I had welcomed into my home, fed at my table, treated like family, were planning to steal my life's work." "Ryan says his contact at Sunny Meadows can get him in for $6,000 a month," Marcus said. "That's only $72,000 a year. We'd still clear over $200,000 annually. $200,000. That's what my life was worth to them, a profit margin on a spreadsheet." I quietly left through the back door, sitting in my truck for an hour crying silently. When I finally went inside, Jessica greeted me with her usual fake smile. "How was the grocery store, Frederick? Did you find everything you needed?" And I had to pretend everything was normal, that I hadn't heard anything, that I was still the same trusting old man who believed in their love. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up planning what to do with this terrible knowledge. At first, I thought about confronting them directly, but then my construction instincts kicked in. In building, you don't tear down a structure until you understand exactly how it was built. The next morning, while they slept, I began my investigation. I started with Jessica's purse, which she always left on the kitchen counter. Inside, I found a small notebook filled with calculations that made my stomach turn. House $850 K. Maria's jewelry $15 K. Antique furniture $30 K. Total assets $895 K, she had written in neat handwriting. Below that, nursing home annual cost $72 K. Net annual profit $200 K plus. My entire life reduced to numbers in a notebook. Maria's wedding ring, the furniture we had saved for years to buy the house we built together, all just line items in their business plan. But what hurt most was finding a separate page titled Timeline. They had been planning this for months, maybe years. Every kindness, every smile, every "how are you feeling today" Dad had been calculated moves in a long game. I didn't even know I was playing. I took photos of every page with my phone, a skill Dorothy from next door had taught me the previous Christmas. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I found it. Over the next week, I discovered more evidence. Text messages on Marcus's phone about handling the old man. Brochures for nursing homes hidden in their bedroom. Business cards from lawyers who specialized in elder care transitions. But the moment that truly changed me came when I was in my workshop, surrounded by the tools that had built my American dream. I was looking at the blueprints for this house, remembering how Maria and I had planned every room, every window, every corner. "She didn't raise a victim," I said aloud, touching her photograph on my workbench. That's when I made my decision. I wouldn't confront them. I wouldn't beg or plead or try to change their minds. Instead, I would do what I had always done best. I would build something. but this time I would build a case. I pulled out a composition notebook and began documenting everything with the same precision I had used for construction projects. Dates, times, conversations, evidence. I organized it like the blueprints for a house, with every detail measured and recorded. 3 days later, Dorothy knocked on my workshop door. She was carrying a plate of homemade tamales and wearing the concerned expression of someone who had been watching from her kitchen window. "Fred," she said, using the nickname. She'd called me for 40 years. I've been watching those two, and something's not right. I looked at this woman who had been my neighbor since Maria and I first moved in, who had brought us soup when Maria was sick, who had helped me through the darkest days after the funeral. If anyone deserved the truth, it was Dorothy. "Dot," I said, reverting to her own nickname, "I need to tell you something." I showed her the notebook, played her some of the recordings I had started making, shared the photos of Jessica's calculations. Dorothy's face grew darker with each piece of evidence. "Those heartless bastards," she whispered, her teacher's vocabulary briefly abandoning her. "Fred, we can't let them get away with this." "We?" I asked. Dorothy reached across my workbench and took my weathered hand in her small, strong one. 40 years we've been neighbors. 40 years I've watched you work, watched you love, watched you build this life. I'll be damned if I let some gold-digging racist and your ungrateful son destroy it all. We shook hands in my workshop that afternoon, sealing an alliance that would change everything. Dorothy had the sharp eyes of a retired school principal and the moral outrage of someone who had spent her life protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. In construction, I told her we measure twice and cut once. Same principle applies here. "Then, let's start measuring," Dorothy replied with a smile that would have made Maria proud. 4 months before the eviction party, Dorothy and I sat in the waiting room of Samuel Chen's law office in downtown Riverside. The modern glass building felt intimidating. I had never needed a lawyer for anything more complicated than buying the house 40 years ago. Mr. Rodriguez, a well-dressed Asian man in his 50s, appeared at the reception desk. "I'm Samuel Chen. Please come in." His office was professional but warm, with family photos on his desk and law books lining the walls. What surprised me most was when he greeted me in perfect Spanish. "Mucho gusto conocerlo, Señor Rodriguez. Dorothy tells me you need help with a family matter." The relief I felt hearing my native language in this formal setting almost brought tears to my eyes. For months, I had been surrounded by people who either spoke down to me or dismissed my intelligence. Here was a professional who treated me with respect. "Samuel," Dorothy said, "Fred has discovered something terrible about his son and daughter-in-law. Show him what you found." I opened the folder I had been carrying and spread out the evidence on his polished conference table. The photos of Jessica's notebook, printed copies of text messages I had photographed, recordings I had made on my phone, and a detailed timeline of their planning. Samuel studied each piece of evidence carefully, his expression growing more serious with each document. After 20 minutes of silent review, he looked up at me with a mixture of sadness and professional determination. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm very sorry this is happening to you. But I need you to know this is more serious than a simple family dispute." "What do you mean?" I asked. Samuel pulled out a thick file from his desk drawer. "Your case matches a pattern we've been tracking. In the past 2 years, I've seen 12 similar cases in this region. Elderly parents being manipulated into signing over their assets, fake medical certificates declaring them incompetent nursing home placements against their will." Dorothy leaned forward. "You mean this is organized?" "More than organized," Samuel replied grimly. "It's a network. And the name that keeps appearing is Ryan Mitchell, your son's friend who works as a mortgage broker." My blood ran cold. Ryan had been coming to the house for months, always with new financial advice, always suggesting I should diversify my assets or consider a reverse mortgage. Samuel continued, "Ryan works with corrupt doctors who will sign mental competency evaluations for money nursing homes that pay kickbacks for referrals, and families who are willing to sacrifice their elderly relatives for financial gain." "Dios mío," I whispered. "How many families?" 12 that we know of. Probably more. The victims are typically elderly immigrants or people with language barriers, people the system assumes won't fight back effectively. The room fell silent as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just about my ungrateful son and his greedy wife. This was about a criminal enterprise that preyed on vulnerable elders. "What can we do?" Dorothy asked. Samuel's expression hardened with professional resolve. "We can stop them, but it will require perfect documentation. Mr. Rodriguez, are you willing to continue gathering evidence? It could take months, and it will be emotionally difficult." I thought about Maria, about the house we built together, about the other elderly victims who had no one to fight for them. Samuel, I've spent 40 years building things that last. If we can build a case that protects other families, then see, I'm willing. Good Samuel said, pulling out a legal pad. Here's what we need. First, we document every conversation, every attempt at manipulation. Second, we gather financial records, showing their true intentions. Third, we build a network of witnesses who can testify to their behavior. He explained the legal process in detail: power of attorney fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud. The charges could be serious if we had enough evidence. The key, Samuel continued, is that they have to believe they're succeeding. You'll need to continue acting like the confused old man they think you are, while secretly building the case that will destroy them. Dorothy squeezed my hand. Fred can do that. He's the strongest man I know. Samuel smiled at her loyalty. Mrs. Williams, your role will be crucial too. As a neighbor and witness, your testimony will carry significant weight. Are you prepared to help? I've been preparing for this my whole life, Dorothy replied with the authority of a woman who had spent 30 years protecting students as a school principal. Samuel pulled out another set of documents. Mr. Rodriguez, I want to represent you pro bono. This case is bigger than your family. It's about protecting vulnerable seniors throughout our community. Pro bono? I asked, not familiar with the term. Free of charge, Samuel explained, because what they're doing is wrong, and because I believe every elder deserves dignity and protection. I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real concrete hope backed by professional expertise and legal authority. There's one more thing, Samuel said, his voice taking on a different tone. When we spring this trap, it will destroy your relationship with your son permanently. There will be no going back. Are you certain you want to proceed? I looked at the photos of Jessica's notebook, at the calculations that reduced my life to profit margins. I thought about Marcus celebrating my eviction, about the other elderly victims who had no one to fight for them. Samuel, I said, my voice steady with 40 years of construction worker determination, my son destroyed our relationship the day he decided to treat me like a burden to be disposed of. I'm not destroying anything, I'm just documenting what they already destroyed. Samuel nodded and pulled out a legal representation agreement. Then let's build the strongest case they've ever seen. As I signed my name to the document that would make Samuel Chen my attorney, I felt Maria's presence in the room. She had always believed in justice and standing up for what was right and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. No más victimas, I said quietly as I finished signing. No more victims, Samuel agreed, shaking my hand with the firm grip of a man who understood that some battles are worth fighting no matter the personal cost. Dorothy smiled at both of us. Those two have no idea what they're about to face. She was right. Marcus and Jessica thought they were dealing with a confused old Mexican who would sign whatever papers they put in front of him. Instead, they had just declared war on a construction worker who knew how to build things that last, including a legal case that would bring their criminal network crashing down. 2 months before the eviction party, Dorothy invited me to her kitchen for what she called a little show and tell. What I discovered there amazed me more than anything in my 67 years. Her dining table was covered with photographs, handwritten notes, timeline charts, and manila folders organized with the precision of a military operation. Dorothy had transformed her home into a command center that would have impressed any detective. Fred, she said, pulling out a chair for me, I need to show you something. I haven't been entirely honest about when I started watching those two. She opened the first folder, revealing dozens of photographs taken with a telephoto lens from her upstairs window. Pictures of Ryan Mitchell visiting our house, of strange men in suits, carrying briefcases, of Jessica meeting with people I didn't recognize in our driveway. Dorothy, I said, stunned, when did you take all these? I started 6 months ago, she admitted, her cheeks slightly pink with embarrassment. The same week you overheard that conversation. I saw how upset you looked when you came back from the grocery store that day, and my teacher instincts kicked in. This was twist 3. Dorothy had been conducting her own investigation parallel to mine, documenting everything with the methodical precision of someone who had spent 30 years managing unruly teenagers. I've been photographing every suspicious visitor, recording license plate numbers, and keeping a log of their conversations when they talk in the driveway, she continued, flipping through pages of meticulous notes. Fred, that Jessica has been saying terrible things about you to anyone who will listen. She pulled out a small digital recorder and played a conversation she had captured from her garden while pretending to water her roses. Jessica's voice came through clearly. The old Mexican is so stubborn. He keeps asking questions about the papers we want him to sign. Ryan says we might need to get a doctor to declare him mentally incompetent. My hands clenched into fists. Even knowing what they were planning, hearing it recorded in Jessica's casual, dismissive tone made my blood boil. "There's more," Dorothy said, gently, understanding my reaction. She showed me a folder labeled Community Concerns. Inside were handwritten statements from other neighbors who had noticed unusual activity around my house. "Mrs. Patterson across the street has been keeping a log too. Mr. Gonzalez next door took pictures of Ryan's car parked here at odd hours. Even the mailman Carlos noticed that Jessica has been intercepting your mail." I felt overwhelmed by this outpouring of community support. These people had been watching out for me, without my even knowing it. "Dorothy, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I wasn't sure what they were planning, and I didn't want to worry you unnecessarily. But when you came to me with your evidence, I realized we were building the same case from different angles." That afternoon, Dorothy suggested we expand our network further. "There's someone else who should know about this," she said. "Father Martinez at Street Joseph's. Half the elderly Hispanic community in Riverside goes to that church. If this Ryan character is running a broader scheme, other families might be at risk." The next Sunday after morning mass, Dorothy and I met with Father Martinez in the church office. He was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who had heard every human tragedy imaginable. "Señor Rodriguez," he said in Spanish, "Dorothy tells me your family is causing you difficulties." I showed him our evidence, explaining the scope of what we had discovered. Father Martinez's expression grew increasingly grave as he reviewed our documentation. "This is not the first time I've heard such stories," he said sadly. "In the past year, 3 families in our parish have lost elderly relatives to suspicious nursing home commitments. Mrs. Esperanza Garcia, Mr. Roberto Vasquez, and Mrs. Carmen Delgado all were placed in facilities against their will after signing papers they didn't fully understand." Dorothy leaned forward. "Were any of them approached by this Ryan Mitchell?" Father Martinez nodded grimly. "See, the same man, the same promises about financial security, the same pressure tactics. But by the time the families realized what was happening, their loved ones were already committed and their assets were gone. My heart broke for these families, but it also strengthened my resolve. Father, what can we do to protect others? We document everything, and we prepare the community to recognize these tactics," he replied. "Would you be willing to share your story with other families who might be at risk?" "Of course," I said without hesitation. Over the following weeks, our small network grew into a community protection system. Father Martinez organized informal meetings after Sunday Mass, where elderly parishioners could share their experiences and learn to recognize warning signs. Mrs. Chen, a retired nurse, joined our group and helped us understand the medical aspects of the fraud. Mr. Gonzalez, who owned an auto repair shop, contributed his photography skills and surveillance equipment. Dorothy taught me how to use smartphone recording apps and helped me set up hidden recording devices around my house. "The key," she explained with her teacher's authority, "is to capture their words in their own voices. No one can deny audio evidence." We established a witness schedule. Different neighbors would be positioned to observe and document any suspicious activity around my house. Mrs. Patterson would watch from her front window during morning hours. Mr. Gonzalez would monitor the afternoon shift from his garage. Dorothy would handle evenings from her kitchen. The evidence we gathered was overwhelming. Recordings of Jessica making racist comments about getting rid of the old Mexican. Photos of Ryan bringing documents for me to sign at suspicious hours. Witness statements from neighbors who had observed the manipulative behavior. Samuel Chen was impressed when we delivered our updated evidence package to his office. "This is the most comprehensive elder abuse documentation I've ever seen," he told us. "With this level of community support and evidence, we can not only protect Mr. Rodriguez, but potentially shut down the entire network." But our growing confidence was about to be tested. As Dorothy and I reviewed our latest recordings in her kitchen, one evening my phone rang. It was Marcus, and his tone was different, more aggressive, more desperate. "Dad, we need to talk," he said without his usual fake warmth. "Some people have been asking questions about our family business, and Jessica thinks you might be talking to lawyers or something crazy like that." My blood ran cold. Somehow, they were getting suspicious. "I don't know what you mean, mijo," I replied, falling back into my confused old man act. "Just remember," Dad Marcus continued, his voice taking on a threatening edge I had never heard before, "we're trying to help you. It would be very unfortunate if you did something to make that help more difficult to provide." The line went dead, and I looked at Dorothy with genuine fear for the first time in months. "They're getting desperate," she said, her teacher instincts reading the situation immediately. "That means we're close to the end game." She was right. Our community network had grown strong enough to protect me, but Marcus and Jessica were about to escalate their tactics in ways we hadn't anticipated. The real battle was about to begin. 1 month before the eviction party, Ryan Mitchell arrived at my house with a briefcase full of official-looking documents and the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from thinking you're dealing with a helpless old man. "Frederick," he called out as he walked through my front door without knocking, Marcus and Jessica trailing behind him like eager students. "I have fantastic news. I've found the perfect solution to all your financial worries." I was sitting in my favorite armchair, pretending to struggle with the Spanish-language crossword puzzle in the local newspaper. The hidden recording device Dorothy had helped me install in the lamp beside my chair was capturing every word. "What kind of solution?" I asked, looking up with the confused expression I had perfected over the past months. Ryan spread his documents across my coffee table with theatrical flair. "A reverse mortgage, my friend. It's like winning the lottery without buying a ticket." Jessica positioned herself behind my chair, her hands resting on my shoulders in what looked like affection but felt like a trap. "Frederick, this is exactly what we've been talking about. A way for you to access your home's equity while still living here." Marcus stood by the window, avoiding eye contact as usual, but I could see his reflection in the glass. His face showed the guilt he was trying so hard to hide. "Now, Frederick," Ryan continued, pulling out a thick contract, "this is a very special deal. My bank is offering you $400,000 cash, and you never have to make a single payment. The bank only gets paid back when you no longer need the house. When I die," he meant, "or when they have me committed to a nursing home." 400,000, I repeated, widening my eyes as if amazed by the number. "That sounds like so much money." "It is," Jessica exclaimed, squeezing my shoulders. "Think of all the things you could do with that money. Medical care, travel, anything you want." What they didn't mention was that a reverse mortgage on my house worth $850,000, according to Jessica's notebook, would leave them with over $400,000 in equity after I was gone. "The best part," Ryan said, leaning forward with his salesman's smile, "is that we can handle all the paperwork right here, right now. No need for complicated bank visits or confusing legal procedures." This was exactly what Samuel Chen had warned me about. Legitimate reverse mortgages require counseling sessions, waiting periods, and independent legal advice. Ryan was trying to rush me into signing without any of the required protections. "I don't know," I said, scratching my head in apparent confusion. "These papers look very complicated. In construction work, we always read everything twice before we sign." Ryan's smile tightened slightly. "Frederick, you don't need to worry about the details. That's why you have family to help you make these important decisions." He pointed to signature lines marked with yellow sticky notes, just like Jessica would do at the eviction party. "Just sign here, here, and here. Don't worry about reading all the fine print." I picked up the pen he offered, then set it down again. "But what does this part mean?" I asked, pointing to a clause about property transfer conditions. "Nothing important," Ryan said quickly, but I noticed sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "Just standard legal language." This was the moment I had been preparing for. I began asking more questions, each one more detailed than the last, pretending to be a confused old man who was accidentally asking exactly the right questions to expose their fraud. "And what happens if I want to move to be closer to family?" I asked innocently. "Well, then the loan would become due," Ryan admitted reluctantly. "How much would be due?" "The full amount plus interest and fees." "How much interest and fees?" Ryan's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Frederick, why don't you just trust us on this? We're trying to help you." But I continued my questions, each one documented by the recording device, each one building the case that would eventually destroy them. After an hour of this, Ryan suggested we move to his bank to complete the paperwork. At First National Bank, Ryan introduced me to a loan officer named Patricia Hendricks, a professional woman in her 40s who seemed genuinely concerned about ensuring I understood the transaction. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said in careful, respectful English, "do you understand that this reverse mortgage means the bank will own your house when you pass away?" "See, I think so," I replied, then added in apparent confusion. "But my son says I can live there as long as I want." Miss Hendricks frowned. "That's true, but only if you maintain the property, pay taxes and insurance, and continue living there as your primary residence. If you move to a nursing home for more than 12 months, the loan becomes due immediately." I saw Ryan shoot a warning glance at the loan officer, but she continued her ethical explanation of the terms. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm required by law to inform you that you have 3 days to change your mind after signing, and I strongly recommend you consult with an independent attorney before proceeding." This was twist 4. Ryan was so eager to complete the fraud that he tried to guide my hand as I held the pen, essentially attempting to forge my signature in front of a witness. "Frederick, just sign right here," he said, actually placing his hand over mine to direct the pen. "Don't worry about what she's saying. It's just bank policy to scare people." "Miss." Hendricks immediately intervened. "Sir, please don't touch the client while he's signing legal documents." "Mr. Rodriguez, do you feel pressured to sign this today?" I looked up at her with grateful eyes. "In construction, we always measure twice and cut once," I said. "Maybe I should take these papers home and read them more carefully." "That's an excellent idea." Miss Hendricks agreed, clearly uncomfortable with Ryan's aggressive tactics. Ryan's face turned red. "Frederick, this is a limited-time offer. If you don't sign today, the deal disappears." But I was already standing up, my construction worker instincts telling me when a structure wasn't sound. "I think I need to talk to my priest about this," I said. "Father Martinez always says important decisions should be prayed about." As we left the bank, Ryan's frustration boiled over. "Old man, you're making a mistake," he said, his friendly mask finally slipping completely. "You're going to sign these papers, one way or another. We're trying to do this the easy way, but there are other ways to handle stubborn seniors." His threat was captured perfectly by the recording app on my phone, which I had learned to activate discreetly thanks to Dorothy's patient teaching. That evening I met with Samuel Chen to review the day's evidence. The recordings of Ryan's pressure tactics, the attempted signature guidance, and especially his final threat provided exactly the documentation we needed. "This is perfect coercion evidence," Samuel said with satisfaction. "Ryan just handed us his conviction on a silver platter." "What happens next?" I asked. "Now they're going to get desperate," Samuel replied. "They've invested too much time and effort in this scheme to give up easily. Expect them to escalate their tactics." He was right. 2 days later, Jessica burst into my house without knocking, her face flushed with excitement and determination. "Frederick, we need to talk," she announced. "Marcus and I have been discussing your situation, and we've decided it's time to move forward with the nursing home plan. We're going to throw you a little farewell party this weekend, so all your friends can wish you well. A farewell party. An eviction party. The final act of their cruel theater. A party, I asked, maintaining my confused old man act, even as my heart pounded with anticipation. "Yes," Jessica exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "A celebration of your new chapter. We'll have cake decorations, all your neighbors. It'll be perfect. Perfect indeed." Because while Jessica was planning my public humiliation, I was preparing to give her the surprise of her lifetime. The trap was set. The evidence was gathered. The community was ready. Let the party begin. The week leading up to my eviction party felt like the calm before a hurricane. While Jessica orchestrated what she believed would be my public humiliation, I was making final preparations for what would actually become the most satisfying day of my 67 years. Jessica threw herself into party planning with the enthusiasm of a Broadway director. She hired professional decorators, ordered custom balloons, and even brought in a photographer to document what she called Frederick's transition to his new life. "This is going to be perfect," she told Marcus, as they reviewed the party timeline in our kitchen, not realizing I was listening from the hallway. "Everyone will see how gracious and caring we are helping him move to a place where he'll be properly cared for." The decorations arrived on Thursday morning. I watched from my workshop window as workers hung a banner across my front porch that read "Finally Free" in bright red letters. Balloons spelling goodbye were arranged around my garden, the same garden where Maria and I had planted roses for our first anniversary. The cruelty was breathtaking, but it was also perfect evidence. That same morning I had my final meeting with Samuel Chen at his office. The conference table was covered with legal documents that represented months of careful preparation. "Frederick, are you absolutely certain you want to proceed?" Samuel asked, his hand resting on the stack of papers that would change everything. "Once we activate these documents tomorrow, there will be no turning back." I looked at the eviction orders, the fraud charges, the elder abuse complaints, and the property transfer documents that would secure my future. "Samuel, they made their choice months ago, when they decided to treat me like a burden to be disposed of. I'm just documenting the consequences of that choice." Samuel nodded and began explaining each document one final time. The eviction notice that would give Marcus and Jessica 24 hours to vacate my property. The restraining order that would prevent them from contacting me. The fraud charges against Ryan Mitchell and his network. The asset protection trust that would ensure my security for the rest of my life. "The timing will be crucial," Samuel said. "I'll arrive at the party exactly at 4 o'clock, after they think they've won. Dorothy will give me the signal when you've finished signing their fake documents." And the recording equipment Dorothy has positioned devices throughout your house. Every word spoken tomorrow will be documented for legal purposes. I signed the legal representation papers with the same steady hand that had signed construction contracts for 40 years. But this time, I was building something different. I was building justice. Back home, Dorothy was coordinating the final technical preparations with military precision. She had transformed into a surveillance expert, positioning tiny recording devices in my living room, dining room, and kitchen. "This one goes in the lamp by your chair," she said, showing me a device no bigger than a coin. "This one behind the picture frame on the mantel. And this one inside the flower arrangement Jessica ordered for the dining table." The irony was delicious. Jessica's own decorations would help document her downfall. "Fred, we need to test the audio quality one more time," Dorothy said, pulling out her smartphone. She had become surprisingly tech-savvy during our months of preparation. We ran through several test recordings, making sure every device was working perfectly. Dorothy's teacher instincts had kicked into high gear, and she approached this like preparing for the most important exam of her career. That afternoon, while Jessica was out picking up the custom cake, Dorothy captured the most damning evidence yet. She was in my garden, pretending to help with the rose bushes, when Jessica returned with two of her friends to review the final party setup. "I can't believe we're finally getting rid of the old Mexican," Jessica said to her friends, not realizing Dorothy was within earshot of her hidden recording device. "His broken English and those tacky religious decorations have been embarrassing me for months." Her friend laughed. "At least you'll finally have a decent house to live in without all that Hispanic clutter everywhere." "The best part," Jessica continued, "is that he's so confused he actually thinks we love him. Tomorrow, when he signs those nursing home papers in front of everyone, it'll be like watching a dog perform tricks for treats." This was Twist 5, Jessica's most racist and cruel comments, captured in perfect audio quality just hours before the party. Dorothy's face was white with rage when she played the recording for me later. "That evil woman," Dorothy whispered, her teacher's vocabulary failing her again. "Fred, tomorrow she's going to get exactly what she deserves." Friday morning dawned, clear and bright, perfect weather for a party, perfect weather for justice. I spent the early hours in my workshop touching the tools that had built my American dream, looking at the photographs of Maria that had sustained me through the darkest months. "Dame Fuerza, mi amor," I whispered to her picture, asking for strength one final time. "Help me protect our home and our dignity." At noon, the catering truck arrived. Jessica supervised the setup with manic attention to detail, making sure every element of my supposed farewell was perfect. The cruel cake was positioned prominently on the dining room table, a beautiful confection with red frosting that spelled out, "No more burden, Frederick." Jessica called out in her fake sweet voice. "Come see your beautiful party. Everyone's going to have such a wonderful time celebrating your new chapter." I walked through my house looking at the decorations that mocked 40 years of hard work, the balloons that celebrated my exile, the banner that proclaimed my family's joy at getting rid of me. But instead of feeling hurt, I felt a calm satisfaction. Every cruel decoration would be evidence. Every mocking smile would be documented. Every celebration of my humiliation would become part of their legal destruction. At 2 o'clock, the photographer arrived to capture what Jessica thought would be the perfect documentation of a loving family helping their elderly patriarch transition to better care. What he would actually document would be the evidence of the cruelest betrayal imaginable. By 3 o'clock, neighbors began gathering on the street, some drawn by curiosity, others positioned strategically as witnesses. Mrs. Patterson waved at me from her front porch. "Mr." Gonzalez gave me a subtle thumbs up from his garage. Father Martinez walked slowly past the house, offering a discreet blessing. My army was in position. At 3:30, Dorothy knocked on my back door one final time. "Everything's ready, Fred," she said, squeezing my hand with 40 years of friendship behind it. "Samuel is on his way. The recording equipment is active. The community is watching." "And you?" I asked. "I'll be right there beside you," she promised. "You're not facing this alone." At 3:45, I heard the first car doors slamming in my driveway. The guests were arriving for what they thought would be my eviction party. I walked to my bedroom and knelt before the photograph of Maria that sat on my dresser. "It's time, mi amor," I whispered. "Time to show them what happens when they underestimate a man who spent 40 years building things that last." I stood up, straightened my shoulders, and walked toward the living room where my son and his wife were waiting to celebrate my destruction. They had no idea that their celebration was about to become the worst nightmare of their lives. The final act was about to begin. The party was in full swing when Samuel Chen knocked on my front door at exactly 4 o'clock. The living room was packed with guests holding champagne glasses, laughing at jokes about my supposed confusion, celebrating what they believed was my final defeat. Jessica was practically glowing with triumph as she directed the photographer to capture every moment of what she thought was my humiliation. "Make sure you get Frederick cutting his own farewell cake," she instructed. "This is a historic moment." Historic indeed, but not in the way she imagined. I had just finished signing what everyone believed were my nursing home admission papers when Samuel appeared in the doorway, briefcase in hand, wearing the serious expression of a man carrying life-changing documents. "Excuse me," Samuel said in a voice that cut through the laughter like a knife. "I'm Samuel Chen, Mr. Rodriguez's attorney. I need to speak with everyone here about some very important legal matters." The room fell silent. Jessica's smile froze on her face. Marcus looked like he'd been struck by lightning. The guests shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware they might be witnessing something other than a heartwarming family transition. "Attorney Jessica," stammered. "Frederick doesn't need an attorney. We're just helping him move to a nice facility where he'll be properly cared for." Samuel opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of official documents. "Actually, Mrs. Rodriguez, that's exactly what we need to discuss. Mr. Rodriguez, would you like to explain to your guests what you actually signed today?" This was it, the moment I had been preparing for, through months of humiliation, documentation, and strategic planning. I stood up slowly, feeling 40 years of construction, worker strength flow back into my shoulders. "Actually," I said, my voice suddenly clear and strong, without a trace of the confused old man accent I'd been performing. "I didn't sign my eviction papers today." The room was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. "What I signed," I continued, looking directly at Jessica's horrified face, "was your eviction notice." The explosion of shocked voices was immediate. Guests began talking over each other, champagne glasses were set down with shaking hands, and the photographer stopped taking pictures, sensing he was now documenting something entirely different. Samuel stepped forward with professional authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to serve legal documents. Marcus Rodriguez and Jessica Martinez Rodriguez, you have 24 hours to vacate this property. You are also being served with restraining orders prohibiting you from contacting or approaching Mr. Frederick Rodriguez." Marcus finally found his voice. "This is impossible, Dad. You can't do this. I'm your son." "My son," I replied, my voice, carrying the weight of months of betrayal, wouldn't have calculated how much money he could make from my suffering. My son wouldn't have called me the old Mexican who was cramping his style. My son wouldn't have thrown a party to celebrate getting rid of me. Jessica's face had gone completely white. "Frederick, this is madness. We're your family. We love you." "Love," I pulled out my phone and played one of the recordings Dorothy had captured. Jessica's voice filled the room clear as crystal. "I can't believe we're finally getting rid of the old Mexican. His broken English and those tacky religious decorations have been embarrassing me for months." The gasps from the guests were audible. Several people began moving toward the door, clearly uncomfortable being witnesses to such cruelty. But I wasn't finished. Samuel handed me another document. "This is also a fraud complaint against Ryan Mitchell and his associates for attempting to coerce an elderly person into signing fraudulent financial documents." As if summoned by his name, Ryan appeared in the doorway, having arrived late to what he thought would be a celebration. His face went from confused to terrified in seconds as he realized what was happening. "Ryan Mitchell, Samuel said you're being served with a criminal complaint for elder fraud conspiracy and attempted forgery." Ryan turned to run, but Father Martinez was standing in the doorway behind him along with Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Gonzalez, and half the neighborhood. My community army had arrived. "Going somewhere?" Ryan Dorothy asked, sweetly appearing from the kitchen, where she'd been coordinating the final evidence gathering. The photographer, realizing he was now documenting a legal proceeding rather than a family celebration, began taking pictures of the document service with professional enthusiasm. Marcus slumped into a chair, his face in his hands. "Dad, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." Jessica said, what I interrupted, "that your father was a burden, that the old Mexican was taking up too much space, that you deserved my house more than I did." The room was completely silent except for Jessica's quiet sobbing. The woman who had orchestrated months of manipulation and cruelty was finally facing the consequences of her actions. Samuel handed me one final document. "And this, Mr. Rodriguez, is the deed transfer that protects your home for the rest of your life, with Mrs. Dorothy Williams as your chosen beneficiary and caretaker." Dorothy stepped forward, and took my arm not as a conspirator, but as the sister she had become over these months of struggle. Fred and I have been neighbors for 40 years, she announced to the remaining guests. Real family isn't about blood, it's about love, loyalty, and respect. The guests began filing out quickly, embarrassed to have been part of what they now realized was a cruel deception. The photographer packed up his equipment, but not before handing me his business card. Sir, if you ever want copies of today's photos for legal purposes, just call me. As the house emptied, Marcus made one last desperate attempt. Dad, please. I know we made mistakes, but I'm still your son. You can't leave me with nothing. I looked at this man who shared my DNA but not my values, who had been willing to sacrifice my dignity for financial gain. Marcus, you're right. You are my son, and that makes what you did even more unforgivable. But I'm not leaving you with nothing, I'm leaving you with the consequences of your own choices. Jessica was still crying as they gathered their belongings. This won't end here, she muttered through her tears. We'll fight this in court. Please do, Samuel replied calmly. I'd love to present 6 months of recorded evidence, witness statements, and fraud documentation to a jury. I'm sure they'll be very interested in your old Mexican comments. As the sun set over Riverside, Dorothy and I sat on my front porch watching Marcus and Jessica load their belongings into a rented truck. The cruel party decorations were still hanging, but now they seemed like victory banners instead of instruments of humiliation. How do you feel? Dorothy asked, squeezing my hand. Free, I replied, and for the first time in months, I truly meant it. For the first time since Maria died, I feel like I'm home. 3 months later, Dorothy moved into the guest room permanently. We established a routine that felt like family: should morning coffee in the garden, evening walks around the neighborhood, Sunday dinners with Father Martinez and other friends from the church. The house that Marcus and Jessica had tried to steal became a refuge for other elderly people facing similar situations. Samuel helped us establish a support network that protected vulnerable seniors throughout Riverside. Marcus and Jessica's relationship crumbled under the pressure of their legal troubles and financial ruin. Jessica moved back to her family in another state, and Marcus found work in a different city, too ashamed to face the community that had witnessed his betrayal. Ryan Mitchell was convicted of elder fraud and lost his license. The nursing home network he had been working with was shut down, and several families received compensation for the abuse their loved ones had suffered. But the sweetest justice of all was the simplest. I was still living in the house I built with Maria, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not for what they could take from me. On quiet evenings, I would sit in my workshop looking at Maria's photograph and tell her about our new life. We did it, mi amor, I would whisper. We protected our home, our dignity, and our family, our real family. The eviction party they threw to celebrate my departure had indeed become historic. It marked the end of their greed and the beginning of my real freedom. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well surrounded by love, in the home you built with your own hands. As I sit here in my workshop 3 years later, surrounded by the tools that built my American dream, I often reflect on the lessons that betrayal taught me. The house that Marcus and Jessica tried to steal has become something even more beautiful. A sanctuary where love is measured not by blood, but by loyalty, respect, and genuine care. Dorothy and I have created a family that Maria would be proud of. We've helped 12 other elderly families recognize and escape similar schemes, working with Samuel Chen to build a network of protection that spans 3 counties. The community that rallied to support me has become a model for how neighbors can protect their most vulnerable members.